Hello, and welcome to Marketing to Complex Industries, presented by Godfrey, a B2B marketing agency for industries like yours. On each episode, we feature conversations about the latest challenges, strategies, and technologies for B2B marketers. I'm your host, Scott Trobaugh. As VP of Creative at Godfrey, I help our team unlock the amazing potential of the brands we serve. On this episode, I'm talking with Emily Spillar. As Godfrey's social media manager, Emily works to execute our clients' social media programs and develops and implements strategies on their behalf. Today, we'll be talking about social media, the latest trends and technologies with regard to that, and what our clients and customers can be expecting in the near future. So, very happy to have you, Emily. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. Now, you've been in this role at Godfrey. You've been at Godfrey for 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah, going on 5 years, which is crazy because I started right out of college. So time flies, really does.
It does. I think we're also, though, living in an era in which age really doesn't matter too much when it comes to expertise on what's hot and what's relevant right now.
Correct. You're right. A lot of things now, it's almost like that reverse mentorship mentality where it's people who are younger, who have grown up with social and have grown up with the internet and technology. They're the experts. Like, I'm still looking to my 16-year-old cousin for help with some computer stuff sometimes. And I'm like, why can't I figure this out?
That's fantastic. And here I am in my 40s. And a year or two ago, you mentored me a bit in getting my Instagram account to, I think you yield a few better results for me than it was.
Yes, we did. We worked on that a little bit.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. Now you've been our social media manager for 2 years. And talk to me a little bit about the development of that role and how you made that happen.
Yeah. So when I started off here at Godfrey, I worked in PR. I was a public relations coordinator, coming out of school with a degree in communications. It was where I wanted to really get my start. As I started working in PR, I really loved the team. I enjoyed what I was doing, but I was starting to work on more social programs. So with B2B, it's always a little bit behind the trend in terms of some of the marketing technologies. So with social at that time, it wasn't huge for a lot of our clients, but it was on the rise. So Twitter, a little bit of Facebook, LinkedIn, and the PR team was getting all of that work. But I really saw that there wasn't anyone driving those programs at that time. So saw that opportunity and kind of worked with my boss at the time and it was like, this would be a really good position for me. It kind of aligns with my interests and went from there.
The thing I like about, what you're saying about B2B, a lot of times being a little bit behind, it really does, I think, looking at it from an optimistic standpoint, it creates opportunities for people who are willing to go out on a limb, take some risks, in some cases, argue for a budget for something. And I'm sure that's interesting for you to see that happen across clients and across industries.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think now almost all of our clients have at least some part of a social program. And now we're really seeing things change too with digital marketing, with paid search, and some different things with programmatic and digital ads that weren't as popular before with our clients, but are now coming to the forefront with a lot of their budgets.
I know the growth of social in general has been astronomical. Around the time that I started at Godfrey, we were referring to it as Web 2.0, and mobile wasn't even anywhere near where it is. The iPhone, I think, was less than a year old, and everybody was still figuring out how all of this stuff was going to work and how it was going to change our lives. But we've seen continued just like hockey stick curve growth in these different arenas. Talk to me a little bit about the trends that you're seeing now with that growth. I'm sure there are numbers associated with it, but what kinds of things are you seeing?
So I think with a lot of the growth, it's, still visual is there, and there is a part for curated content. So things that are, really fall into an aesthetic. But I think now it's moving more towards in the moment and real time. So there's a lot more things that are live and less planned out that are happening. So Instagram lives are huge. You're seeing live webinars, you're seeing recorded podcasts like this. You're also seeing things like Clubhouse come up, and those aren't necessarily things that are planned ahead, or there might be a loose agenda, but they're not that full-fledged production or full-fledged photo shoots as they were before.
That's been interesting for me because typically I wouldn't be necessarily on the cutting edge of anything like that. I wouldn't be what anybody would call an early adopter. I sort of watch, I talk to people like you, I get to know it, and then I think I process a little bit more. But even a week ago, I got a text from a friend of mine who was getting into a Clubhouse meeting with a bunch of people around a conference that Cliff Lewis and I spoke at. And she said, "Can you jump on Clubhouse right now? We're talking, and I'd love to ask you some questions." And I said, I'm on a call right now. I can be over there in half an hour." And she said, "That's great. Okay, I'll expect you at 11:30." And I was like, this is a scenario where opportunity favors the prepared. And at the same time, you sort of just have to jump out there. Like I hopped on thinking that we'd talk for 5 minutes, and we ended up like in this 20-minute interview, and people were asking questions, and it was really it was the first time I'd ever spoken on that platform. So that's interesting. I mean, people are seeing that, they're hearing that, and I mean that's still in I think a beta. It's invite only. Tell me more about when I think about platforms like that one. When I think about platforms like TikTok, what's the relevance that you see to our industries, to B2B in general, or is it something that they need to be watching and waiting a little bit?
For B2B, we are more apt to watch and wait with a lot of these trends. So things like TikTok and things like Clubhouse, they're what people want to be consuming in their free time. And that's a little bit different for B2B audiences. So you're not really necessarily going to sit there and, scroll through construction video product walkarounds. But maybe in your free time, you do want to see that dog walking down the street. To some fun songs, or you do want to see, someone with what is their day in the life routine. It's just a little bit different in that free time. So I think it's B2B watching and waiting to see how other brands are adapting to it. And then are there opportunities for them to either leverage user generated content if it is related to their industry or their product, or is there an opportunity for them to create their own or find their own niche in it? For example, I don't know if you heard this, Scott, actually, but IHOP did on Clubhouse a Clubhouse that was strictly the sound of bacon sizzling. That was it. There weren't people talking. It was just bacon sizzling, and people were tuning in just to hear it. So it's seeing things like that too, and how could that be applied to your industry or your company?
That sounds absolutely fascinating and not at all surprising. Not for a second does that surprise me that was a thing. Because, well, I think that there's probably some kind of a rule around how long a social media platform is around before something is focused solely on bacon. But it also, I mean, it's proof that people are going to start to really explore the perimeter, and explore the possibilities. It just reminds me of somebody doing a Kickstarter for making potato salad, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
There's always going to be somebody who sort of subverts the assignment, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, though, like I said, with B2B, it is just figuring out how do things work for you? How does it work into your overall marketing strategy as well? Because social is a small piece of it, but you do have access with social to more of a widespread audience. But it's also learning a little bit more about that platform, about that platform's audience and how they're using it. And then how does that fit in with your strategy?
It strikes me that rather than being all in or all out, which seems sort of like a myopic view of it, there really is a spectrum there where you can be a consumer, you can be somebody who's socially connected, you could be socially connected with people who you might be doing business with, but you're just friends sort of on a human level, which could then help you possibly close a deal down the road, certainly. LinkedIn, I think, is especially great for that. But it strikes me that there's also this position that you can be in where you're watching and participating at a level that feeds your understanding of it and gives you a better sense of when it's time to actually get involved.
Yeah, there definitely is. I think it's just taking that time, again, like I said, understand what is the reporting that's available, what is the audience demographics that's available on those platforms, and dipping your toe in a little bit here and there. We always say it's a marathon, it's not a sprint when it comes to social, because when you start, you're going to be grinding out that content day over day, week over week, year over year. And it's really understanding, how do you thoughtfully plan things out? How do you start testing the waters to figure out what resonates, what doesn't, and then how can that guide you down the line for long-term content creation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to say that it's a marathon and not a sprint, because there's so much importance, I think so much urgency placed on what's popular right now. You're going to miss a trend if you don't jump on it in the next 48 hours, right? Everything feels very immediate. And to have that understanding that it is longer term, that it, there are definitely chapters in this book, but it's a long book is a good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's a very long book, because also when you start, you can't really stop. So, there have been clients where we've altered, what platforms they're on. So maybe they were on Twitter before, but that's not serving them as much of a purpose as possibly Instagram. So make the recommendation to switch efforts over. But once when you start then posting on Instagram, you do have to keep up with it. And especially to see a return, you have to make sure that you're aligning with the algorithms, that you're putting out that content consistently and you're engaging with users consistently, or else you're not going to see that return, and then it's just going to fizzle out.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about, in your role, how you put together reports and that kind of thing for clients, because what is a good number of Twitter followers to one entity might be huge for another, or might be very small for a third. I think it's all relative. How do you determine that, and what kinds of reporting structures do you have when you're working with clients?
Yeah, so reporting is a big part of what I do in my role. So a lot of people think I'm more on the creative side, and I'm actually more on the analytics and the strategy side. So when we're putting together our reports, and we really often get the question, is this good? Is this follower count good? Is this engagement good? Well, we really put it in the context of, okay, let's see where your competitors are at. Now, your competitors, are they in line to you, or are they aspirational? Because that can also determine where you fall. And then also let's look at industry benchmarks. So all of those things together, as well as past performance, we pull together to really align, is this good in terms of performance? For reporting, we really look at follower growth, but more importantly than that, we do look at engagements, impressions, and then clicks. So social is great for awareness overall, but ultimately you want to be using it as a vehicle to drive people to your website. So it's a really great tool for that. And I think people forget that there's opportunities beyond just the likes and the comments and the shares, that there's really a valuable opportunity to drive people to your site and to make a decision there.
Yeah, it would seem that there could be some misconceptions where maybe you don't get a lot of likes on something, but you're seeing traffic head to the site because people aren't stopping to actually react; they're actually taking action, which would be good. So yeah, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and Instagram and Facebook are both looking at or have tested out versions of their platforms where they've actually gotten rid of the like feature. So imagine that. Imagine scrolling through your Instagram feed and not knowing how many likes as a vanity metric that's right there that an image got. I think that alone really then switches the mindset of a marketer of what is valuable content then, because either you want someone to share a post, you want someone to save a post, or you want someone to go to your website. And those mindless scrolling and liking posts of pretty pictures, that might go away. And it might be what's more about the copy or more about the messaging, and then the further purpose for that.
I had heard that about Instagram and was reading some things about it. But do you know more about what their rationale was for removing that feature?
I think part of it was actually away from the marketing aspect of it and actually more towards the mental health aspect of it, which is a little bit different, obviously, from B2B. It's like the personal user with social. Because I think we forget
Hmm.
that too, is that on social media, it's very rare that a person has their personal profile and their professional profile tied in or separated. Usually they're tied into one. So when you're reaching out to users on social media, it's who they are as an entity. It's, everything they like, from cooking and fitness and bloggers to also then marketing followers or brands that might resonate with them in terms of competitors that they want to keep their eye on. So it is everything. So I think the likes are actually more for a personal aspect of it, just from people getting actual validation from seeing those likes come in, which is funny because I see brands do the same thing. Brands get validation from saying, hey, we had 1 million likes on this post. Did you see that? Okay, but then what did it do further? So that's the other side of it.
Yeah, there was a book that I read by Martin Lindstrom called Small Data, where he talked about the big data of things like those more numerical examples, and then the small data of really understanding the anecdotal reasons why somebody liked it, and the very sort of human connections. We make a lot of assumptions, I think, when we just look at numbers on a spreadsheet versus actually getting into the sort of empathetic, emotional nature of it.
Right. And social, especially, I think is very much that. I think, there's something in us that compels us to like a post, or there's something in us that compels us to visit someone's profile. It's because you resonate with that content in some way. I think that part of marketing sometimes is lost, is that there is a person on the other side of the screen. And I think especially with B2B, just because it is a little bit different in what we ultimately want our potential customers to do, we forget that as well.
Yeah, there is a level of social responsibility. I mean, I think that's probably more directly understood for B2C, um, because they're doing lifestyle stuff, and they're actually appealing to consumers to purchase or consume or travel or do whatever it is that their brand has. For B2B, it tends to be more about these longer buying cycles, larger purchases, and that kind of thing. But I do think there's still that that relevance to respecting the fact that you're working with humans.
Yeah. And I think that our clients do that in a way where we highlight on things other than the products. We highlight on, the industries that we are working in, and we touch on the sustainability aspects for some of our clients. So there are certain parts that we're not just this company and it's not just this product, but we're helping build products that are helping in hospitals, or we're helping build products that are helping with transportation, or to build commercial buildings that can help house, residents, or whatever it may be. There is that piece of it too that I think is important that our clients highlight when we're putting together social content.
You raise a good point there because I've often talked with students about getting into advertising, getting into design, and marketing in general. And one of the things that I've said is, you don't often think about B2B. There aren't a lot of college students who are like, I'm going to go get into industrial marketing, right? They don't really talk much about that. But one of the things that I've mentioned is that I've never had a crisis of conscience on anything that we've ever promoted, because the kinds of things that come through are we're going to outfit all of our vehicles with more fuel efficient engines, and they're going to be economical, and they're going to be easy maintenance, and those are the kinds of things that you can get excited about and actually feel good about promoting.
Exactly. And I think that's something that sometimes also gets lost, is those products, there isn't that conscious, like, this doesn't feel good. Like everything, I think with B2B, it's helping things that are larger, which then make a change in the world that we live in. So I agree. Like, it's not always the glamorous, like, oh, I want to work in beauty or food or fashion. It's, it's gears, it's motors, it's construction equipment, but they're important things, and you do feel good about it.
Yeah, well, and the fascination factor, of course, is humongous. And that's one of the things we always enjoy talking about at Godfrey, is just the what you learn about the hidden ways the world works. Always enjoyable. Um, Give me a couple of examples, if you have them, of ways that B2B companies are effectively integrating social media into their like tactical communication arsenal. Like, how are they? Um, what are some actual like demonstrable ways that people are integrating this stuff?
For B2B, it's really looking at what different pieces of marketing collateral that you have and how can you leverage it for social. So one way especially is just breaking it down into smaller pieces. And we see this often with video. So video is often a larger investment, but you can really get a lot of traction out of it. And that is by either posting it natively in the long form content of it, or breaking it apart into small video clips or animations, or even utilizing B-roll with some text overlay for social content as well. Additionally, it's also looking at what other pieces of marketing or content that you might have. So it could be PR content with a white paper or case study. How do you make that maybe audio or visual for social? Or how do you break it down into an infographic? And how do you break that down into a micrographic? So I think it's really thinking that social is these bite-sized pieces of these larger things that you might already have and you might have already invested in. So it's really how do you pull apart pieces from that to then leverage in social and on your content calendar? Because like I said, it is a marathon, it isn't a sprint. So looking at how you can get a lot of content from one larger piece of collateral really can help.
How do you help marketers, especially B2B marketers, consider where they should be on social media?
So I think that question is twofold. First, it's looking at the platforms, and then it's also looking at the audiences on that platform. So especially for B2B, our bread and butter is LinkedIn. It's just great platform all around. And especially when you're going into paid social media, how you're able to actually target users on that platform. You can target by specific skills, by job titles, by job function. So you can really break down and you know that your audience is there. It's also primarily there's with engineers, there's also product managers, there's people you want to target. So that's the first part of it. I think for the other platforms, for like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it's really doing your research. See if your competitors are on it. How are they using it? What are their engagement rates like? Are they getting a lot of comments? Are the comments negative in nature? Because usually with Facebook, users are using it more as a customer service tool, as a way to get in touch with the brand. Same with Twitter. They're not really looking to engage in thought leadership content like they are on LinkedIn. They're looking to kind of, air out some grievances that they might have. For Instagram, that's a different purpose. That might be inspiration. So, what is your brand trying to do in terms of sustainability or innovation? That's a really good place for that content. But again, it's looking at competitors, it's looking at publications, it's looking at groups in your industry and seeing, are they on these platforms? Are their audiences engaged? And then making that decision for yourself, for your brand.
As you're talking about customer service and that kind of thing, tell me more about responsiveness, social listening, and stuff like that, and how people can, within their sphere, how they can leverage whatever platform they're on. Like, what kinds of things should they be thinking about with that?
So we encourage our clients to have a response plan in place. So with social, you will get positive feedback, but you also may get some negative. So it's figuring out how do you address some of those comments. So how do you take those conversations offline? And really, how do you get ahead of that too? So really proactively monitoring your accounts, engaging with comments. So again, social is a two-way communication. It's a way for you to reach your audience, but it's also a way for your audience to reach your brand. So you really want to put the effort into fostering those conversations or even listening to feedback, whether it is negative, it might be hard to hear, but how can you relate that to some business decisions internally and maybe change some things with process that can make it a better experience for the customer? So we'd like to work with our PR team with that. PR has a really good way of, communicating with other stakeholders and communicating with the public. That's their niche. So looping them into social that way by having them help to lead, find, and foster those conversations is a really good way to ease that level of monitoring from one person or, a small social team to really make it a larger part.
When you talk about sort of the negative aspect of it, because it's easy to focus on the positive, but like you said, people do get on to air grievances. They get on to get attention to an issue that they may be having. And at a consumer level, they do that with airlines and they do it with phone companies and all kinds of other entities. You're going to get some of that in B2B. So it sounds like we should probably touch on reputation management a little bit as well, and that's that intersection that you were just talking about of social and PR. What kinds of things should people be watching for, and how much communication needs to happen at that company level to really do that well?
So I think it is through monitoring your platforms over time, you'll start to get a trend of, what is normal engagement looking like, the sector of followers that are just these negative type trolls that are just posting things to post them and they don't necessarily warrant a response. So I think sometimes it's also looking at that comment and determining, is there something actionable that we can do on our end to make this better? Does this person just want to be heard, or is this person just posting to post? So those are the three things we always consider when we're monitoring and before we respond to comments. And I think for the people that are just posting negativity to post it, you can try to address it one or two times by taking that conversation offline by saying, hey, we sent you a private message. Please reach out to us there. We'd like to talk to you more about your feelings about the brand or this problem that you're encountering. If they're not even willing to have that conversation offline with you, then they're just a lost cause, kind of. So you can't let those small people determine your entire plan. You need to look at it as a whole and really listen to what your audience is saying from all aspects of other things to determine if it's just this person or if it is a larger issue. And if it is a larger issue, how do you address that? Do you put problems in front of the product team? Do you pass things along to HR? And then how do you address things from there?
Yeah, so a solid response plan, multiple members of your team engaged in that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. And I think being responsive too, it doesn't necessarily have to be, especially with B2B, within 24 hours. Again, it's not like an airline or it's not like Amtrak's or FedEx where you need a response right away. But you do want to be monitoring at least 2 to 3 times a week your platforms to really have a pulse on what's going on and to address any negative things, but also positive things. You might have a lead in there that you need to follow up with. You never know.
One thing that is interesting to me is when I look at online reviews, either through like Google or Yelp or any of those kinds of services. And a lot of times they may skew negative toward a business. And I'm reminded of one of my earliest forays into mass communication, which was I had a radio show when I was in my late teens. And one of the things that somebody told me is only 1% of your audience is ever going to call you. You have a prize, you have a call in kind of opportunity or whatever. Only 1% is ever really going to engage you on the phone. Most people are just passively listening. Is there any kind of a rule of thumb for that on social? Is there any way to understand that? I'm sure it would vary by industry and by audience. I guess I'm looking for some of those like sort of secret like rules that perhaps get passed around in your circles.
Yeah, I think it's more aligning with opportunity, and that's what people are willing to engage with. So if there's something, people are always listening, they're always scrolling. They're just,
Yeah.
the mindless scroll, whether that's on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. So I think it's figuring out what are those key pieces of content each month that you actually want people to engage with, or what are those campaigns where you're really looking for engagement or you're looking for web traffic, and how do you focus on those pieces. So that can be with a giveaway. That does work on social, tag a friend in the comments below, follow this account. That works when there's an offer for someone. Same thing with an event. So putting it out there of a webinar, or hopefully one day, again, a live conference. Those are things that really can garner engagement. And then other things as well are just video and super creative, or things that stand out a little bit differently, or things that might pique your audience's interest. So it's really, what is that 3-second hook in that video that's going to get people to either stay for the 15, 30, 60 seconds that you might have them. I think those are the things, it's focusing on what are those high value pieces of content that you really want to drive action, and making sure that those stand out in some way for your audience on social.
That makes a lot of sense. Thinking about, especially when you mention a hook, right? I like that as a term, because it really is what you're looking to do. I mean, they talk about that with a pop, like a pop song. We all know what the hook is. It's the part that gets stuck in your head. What is it that you're going to do to entice people? And then the thing is, I think with B2B especially, what you're going to give them for responding to that tends to skew much more authentic than perhaps some other brands might be. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's exactly right. It is. It's going to be a little bit more authentic. People aren't just going to, you know, enter just to enter to see what happens. They're actually going to really want, if it is a giveaway, for example, they are going to really want to invest in that, or sign up for that webinar or that conference, or watch that video, because they are actually invested and interested in your product or your technology or your brand.
We have a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to ask you a couple of more sort of general and maybe even fun questions. What's the biggest piece of advice that you usually give to B2B marketers when it comes to social media?
I think it goes back to, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So you're not going to have 10,000 followers overnight. You're not going to have 1 million views on a video in a week. It's really putting in the work to develop that content calendar, to plan ahead, and to just be consistent. Be consistent in your responses, be consistent in your messaging, and be consistent in your posting.
I think that's really good advice. What's an example of a really great B2B account that one that you just think they're doing it the right way?
I think GE does a really great job. And I think a lot of that has to do with their messaging, but also the imagery that they use. I think all around they do a really good job of communicating and connecting with their audience on social platforms.
That's a really good one. I've used that as an example with people before, as an example of an industrial B2B company, and I think it's because it's a household name. Everybody knows it from light bulbs and that kind of thing. But then you look at
Mhm.
some of these bigger things that they're doing. The fact they're actually running primetime television commercials, people understand that it's a much sort of broader product offering than ever before. That's good. How about just for fun, just a fun account on any platform?
Just for fun, I love comments by celebs on Instagram. Very interesting. So they pretty much just find celebrity comments on the platform and, bubble those up to the surface. So I think that's also a really interesting way where they also utilize social listening and that functionality, but for celebrities, and then made that content. So they're a fun one.
So these are when celebrities actually comment on other celebrities' posts, or just anybody's post?
just anybody's post, but usually it's other celebrities that they're pulling out, and then they have like subsets. So I like the comments by celebs, the Bravo version. So big
Hmm.
fan. So it's interesting to see other Bravo celebrities, what they comment on each other's posts. And sometimes there's really interesting things that bubble up there.
I'm gonna have to check that one out. I actually was not aware of that one. That sounds absolutely great.
Mm.
Very good. Hey, thank you so much, Emily. It's been a pleasure to pick your brain on this today and to get those insights, not only from an experienced social media perspective, but also from that PR angle. I think that the two seem to be very close together, but you have a clearer perspective on being responsible and responsive, I think, as a result of that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Scott. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Marketing to Complex Industries has been presented by Godfrey, a B2B marketing agency for industries like yours. Godfrey is built for technical products, discerning buyers, and intricate buying cycles. For more information, visit us at godfrey.com.